We've been talking about the trans people in sports problem for quite a bit now, and I've previously made the argument that trans women should be able to participate in women's sports, and trans men should be able to participate in men's sports. That's leaving out some non-binary people who I don't know what exactly the solution is in that situation, and I'm not really pushing that anyway. I don't think that I honestly don't know if I believe that trans women belong in women's sports anymore. Because I think what I believe now is that there shouldn't be women's sports. There shouldn't be men's sports. There definitely shouldn't be a separate but equal league for just trans people. But I think that I have looked at some research and come to the conclusion that if you would let men and women compete against each other, if you account for things like height and weight, I believe that they are fully capable of being competitive. I think that women would work harder and to be better at sports if they weren't in a separate league. And listen, I can go into my reasons, but I'm not going to go into my extensive list of reasons right now why that is the case. But I have proof. I don't even need to cite any studies. I don't even need to because I have anecdotal evidence. If you're enjoying this video, hit the like button, maybe subscribe, hit all notifications if you want. Feel free to check out the links in the description. You might find some merch you like. Or you can hit up the Patreon to support the content and find free stuff. So in order to bolster my argument that cisgender women are fully capable of being competitive against cisgender men, we have the story of Audrey Jimenez. She's a wrestler. She did high school wrestling, and she became the first female ever to win a high school wrestling state title in the state of Arizona, competing against the boys. She was 18 years old from Sunnyside High School in Tucson, and she won the Division I title in the 106-pound weight class on February 18th this year. She had to win an appeal with the Arizona Interscholastic Association in order to compete against boys in the wrestling season. And then she made history. She beat 4 male wrestlers, including the championship match opponent. She's announced that she's going to be attending Lehigh University, which is awesome. This is her. She was competitive with the boys and she won the state title. That's crazy. Obviously based on her name, if you couldn't guess before, she's Latina. She loves Mexico and being Mexican. She's training for the Olympic trials. She's going to be training. She'll likely be top seed in the challenge tournament, according to this article. I'm assuming that she'll be competing with the women at that. But she won the state title in the girls division freshman, sophomore, and junior year. She won the state title 3 years in a row. She was like, I am too good to continue playing with the girls. If you guys consider it a bigger challenge to play against the boys, then that's the next thing I need to be able to do. I think previously girls would have been wrestling with boys. I don't know if they even were able to participate at state level, but high school wrestling was sanctioned for girls during her freshman year. So she was, from the time she was a freshman, she had to participate with only the other girls. And I think previously, I think we talked, some people in chat mentioned that previously, you know, years and years ago, if there wasn't a girls wrestling team and a girl really wanted to, then she would compete with the boys. But let me be clear, this is not a trans girl. She is not trans. She's a cis girl. She is a regular cis woman who is competitive with the boys and beat them at the state title. I know that usually we're talking about the trans thing, but like this is evidence for my belief that cisgender women should be allowed to compete with cisgender boys. There shouldn't even be a gender difference. If you account for weight, I don't think that there should be any difference. Oh yeah, she was wrestling boys through the entire high school season, except at sectionals and state. I watched a video that claimed they only started segregating the Olympics by gender because the women were catching up to the men. That's what I've heard. Even with something like shooting and figure skating, which you don't think are really strength-dependent things that women would never be able to compete in. At first, there's no rule against women competing, but they just don't. And then women join and they start competing and they start doing well, and that threatens male supremacy, so then they are barred from participation, and then a couple years later, a separate women's league is then created for them to have their own cute little competition amongst themselves because they could never compete against the men. You know, we're just like male supremacy all day. But yeah, evidence in wrestling, which wrestling we do consider to be, it's a contact sport, it's very physical, It's one of those where people would go, oh, well, a girl would obviously get hurt if she went up against the boys. Like, this is just some Mexican girl. Like, she doesn't even look like she's crazy tall. She only weighs 106 pounds, like 110 pounds. She's a very small person, but she's going up against other people who are the same size as her, even if she's going up against boys. Like, if you just equal things out for the physical traits that you allegedly care about, if you allegedly care about bone density, then make bone density tests part of the deal and only put people with similar bone densities next to each other. But we know that's not actually why they, like, none of the actual specific physical reasons that they give are the actual reason for the justification for them barring trans people from participating. They're just doing it to be discriminatory, you know? I do wonder if there's going to be some assumption that this girl is trans, though. Like, I don't know how people could see. I don't know. People are really stupid. They're probably going to look at her and be like, oh my God, she's so muscular. She must be a man, really. Like, oh, even like these trans athletes are so intense that they even beat all the boys. It's like, no, dumbass. If it wasn't for trans players, would conservatives care about women's sports? No, they wouldn't care about women's sports at all. Women's sports are like the butt of the joke for right wingers. All the time. All the time. Wingnuts are calling Taylor Swift trans. I know, she dares to have a pelvic bone. Chatter says, up in my part of the country, there was a controversy because a cis boy accidentally injured an opponent who happened to be a girl in a high school field hockey game by unintentionally hitting her in the face with the ball. People got all up in arms about this boy participating against girls. In this instance, there is no boys-only field hockey, even though presumably the same actions would have injured an opposing boy player. And yes, a bunch of people started talking about trans athletes in women's sports in the story, despite there being no trans people in the story. Right. That people could willingly engage in a co-ed team and receive an injury that is totally normal. Totally normal. It's like when people are talking about, oh, Fallon Fox, busted her cisgender opponent's face and gave her an orbital injury. And it's like, dude, that is an extremely common injury for women, cis women, to give other cis women in that sport. So Fallon Fox giving that injury to someone is a totally normal, statistically insignificant thing to have happened. It has nothing to do with the genders of the people involved. If you get hit in the face really hard with a ball, it's going to hurt no matter what your gender is and no matter what the other gender of the person is who threw it at you. I'm sure that there's some of us out here who've been just pucked in the face with a dodgeball that was thrown by a girl, and it's like not that different. And Fallon Fox also lost to several cis women. Yeah, she was just a normal woman competing with women. Yeah, we need to institute a new rule. Anyone who wants to talk about trans people in women's sports must first provide evidence of their advocacy for female athletes in areas that have nothing to do with trans people going back at least 3 years. Just jumping on, like, if you managed to eliminate trans existence in sports, like, let's just pretend like we solved the problem. There are no more trans people in the world, much less in sports. These people are going to go back to ridiculing women's sports. And like, it's a common joke that people don't want to watch the WNBA. Like, it's super, super, super common in the zeitgeist. Like, there were jokes in Futurama about like undervaluing women's sports. It's just like Family Guy did jokes about, like, it is so normal to make fun of women's sports, which again is part of why I think there should not be any such thing as women's sports. Desegregate all sports. Teach these men how to put some respect on your name. Maybe. In The Office also made jokes about it. It is common lowbrow comedy fodder to make fun of women's sports, particularly the WNBA. Really, really cool, though, that she won. So proud of her. Simpsons did it first with an old Simpsons joke where Homer says girls should stick to girl sports. That to me was the most dumbass thing about lady ballers. The idea that some cis male, who's not even an athlete, by the way, like Kelsey, you say any cis male athlete could just show up and dominate in a women's sport by virtue of being men. But it's like, they're not even athletes. It's literally the concept that any cis guy, even a guy who hasn't played sports since he was in high school or college, like, that's the premise of the thing, is that they had a team when they were in high school or college, and they were like, oh, we should put this team together. And it's a team of really unathletic, average cis guys going up against actual athletes and just being able to, like, dominate. until they get to the last game, and that last game is versus another team full of cis men pretending to be women, except that they're also black dudes, so there's like an additional weird racial aspect to it. Like it, if it was an honest game between two teams of men, then it might have been kind of even, but because it's versus a team of black players, like, oh, of course, we're going to get, that means that we, the white players, are going to get stomped out just as much as we were stomping out the female players. It's all very deeply stupid and heavily entwined. Much love to my patrons, especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvog, Michelle Frateroli, Amanda B., Wellington Marcus, Michelle Winter, Danielle McDonald, DZXN, Suzanne Maynard, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Jamie Jam, Pasnell Infinity, Nova, Sojo, Elizabeth Bartell, Ella V. Nobody, Kevin Young, Sarah A., Athiet, Celeste, Desi Quiche, Liam Hodgson, and Mr. Atheist.